Welcome to our Back to Travel webinar. Today is July 23rd, 2020, and I'm your host, Peter Soltakis. Joining me today, we have two distinguished participants. Joining us from Discovery Inc., home of name brand TV networks like Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, Science Channel, TLC, Food Network, HGTV, and Travel Channel, is Discovery's VP of Global Travel Services, Yukari Todorich. Yukari has headed up Discovery's travel program since 1999 and is also an active member of the travel industry, having served as president of the BWBTA in Baltimore, Washington area, as well as a member of GBTA's hotel committee. Welcome, Yukari. And joining us from FCM's Fourth Dimension Consulting Division is Senior Consultant Mike Cox. Mike has over 25 years of travel industry experience and brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. He's worked in the consulting space for the past 20 years, and before that, he managed Thomson Reuters' global travel program. Welcome, Mike. And if you can both please go ahead and turn your cameras on, we'll wave to the audience. And with that said, today's webinar will focus on establishing a framework focused on how companies will return to some semblance of normal business travel. A big focus of today will also be focused on helping travel management professionals ask the right questions of both themselves as well as their organizations before they start putting people back on the road again to some semblance of historical volumes. Mike will start us off by walking through 4D's sophisticated and recently developed return to travel framework, Project Workbook, and then we'll pivot over to Yukari, who will share what Discovery has been doing to prepare itself for business travel in today's current, but also tomorrow's post-COVID-19 world. Quick housekeeping, please drop any questions in the chat box on the GoTo platform, and we'll also be recording this, so we'll send out this afterwards. On that note, Mike, over to you. What can you tell us about the Return to Travel Project Workbook?
Thank you, Peter. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all healthy and safe. Let's talk a little bit about travel. This section is going to take probably about 20-25 minutes. Peter will pepper me with some questions here and there, but for the most part, I want to talk about what we need to do in order to responsibly turn on corporate travel again. And setting the stage is questions that I've received recently, so or considered. So what would you do if one of your travelers starts showing symptoms while on the road? Right, this is a big thing. This is why we can't just turn on travel again. We need to have some plans behind it. How much travel and how many events should I replace with video conferencing? A lot of clients that we're talking to are looking at not going back to 100%, seeing if they can find a new normal, especially with internal meetings. How comfortable are my people in traveling, and how can we make the people that we're visiting comfortable with hosting us? Especially, that's very important if your product, your service involves visiting other people. Never mind sales calls and account management calls. How do we get people comfortable? How do I identify value generating travel and get those folks on the road faster? So value generating, typically we're talking about revenue generating, but it could also be client retention, client acquisition, could be internal harmony, collaboration. There could be a bunch of different reasons that you decide what value is. But how do we figure that out, and how do we get those people on the road? Next, what message will we be sending our industry? I had a couple of CFOs bring this up to me, saying, what will it look like if we're out on the road before all our competitors? Does that make us look too aggressive? Or what if we wait till everything's in place? Does that make us look passive or too conservative? How are we going to figure that out? What should my sourcing and vendor management strategies, how should they change? I'm going to tell you they're going to change. And I think everyone here probably realizes that. But how should they is really the question that will come up. And then what and how should I budget for 2021? That's a fabulous question. So, and I know because I wrote it. Question number 8, which is not on here, is do I have to start wearing pants again? What we're looking at from these questions, we've come up with a framework, an Excel spreadsheet, which I'm hoping you all downloaded. and it prompts all these questions. Unfortunately, we don't have all the answers for these because they're very specific to your company, right? But we want to make sure that you're well armed while you're developing the return to travel proposal presentation process. Here are some quick trends and benchmarks as to what to expect, and a number of you have probably filled out this survey. You can always find the most updated surveys on our website, on the FCM website. But right now, in terms of when are people expecting travel to resume, 40, 50%, say between the next 3 to 6 months, 40 to 60% actually, and then some of them will take a little longer. For domestic and international, everyone seems to think it's going to take a little bit longer, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. What are we doing? This goes to the question of why should we travel? Well, the two biggest ones are to win new business and to manage existing customer relations, right? So how are we going to identify which travel helps us facilitate that? Those are the questions that we need to ask from that perspective. When will we return? Well, certainly international travel will be restrictions on borders, right? And even some domestic where we're running into quarantines on a state-by-state basis. And then also when our organization deems it safe to travel. Okay, well, how is the organization going to do that? Well, the framework is built to help you do that. The travel policy changes. I'm willing to bet that most companies have some interim COVID process in place, sort of approval in place. Going forward, what do we also need to do? Because this is unfortunately going to be with us for quite some time. And so the biggest areas were duty of care and the health and hygiene. I think both of those actually should really inform your vendor management strategy as well, not only your travel policy. But these are some snapshots of the things that we've talked to from people. So talking about the framework, I'm not going to actually go through the Excel spreadsheet and all the questions on the spreadsheets and the format, just simply because it's boring to watch people page through Excel. On this is the summary of what you'll see. In there, we address travel policy, safety and well-being, vendor management, and cost consideration. We have a couple of tabs in terms of how they work, but generally speaking, how do we make sure our people are comfortable and safe? How do we make sure our vendors are helping us keep our people safe? And also, what can we do from a sourcing perspective? How aggressive should we be in terms of renewing contracts or extending contracts? Cost considerations, how are we aligning travel with revenue generation, right? In most cases, because that's basically why we have a corporate travel program, right? We're trying to increase our margins for the most part. It's safety, savings is always the biggest driver. Safety has really jumped up in the past few months as a driver as well, but when we're looking at it, how do we make sure that every dollar that we spend in travel is really forwarding much more value in terms of whether it's revenue or some other particular value, but we're measuring that. That's the key, is not just assuming it's going to happen. We're actually targeting and measuring that. And that all comes back to the policy. It all wraps back into the policy after that. Sort of what's allowable travel, how should you travel, who should travel. So the Project Workbook. Oh, by the way, I talk really fast. Typically on these recordings, you can slow it down. So maybe pay me back half speed if I'm running through these things particularly quickly. The Project Workbook, Russ, has 7 sections in it, right? And each section's got, anywhere from 8 to 12, 15 questions on them. The framework just explains the framework. The trends and benchmark actually were what we just looked through. The project team, the company financial, there's a company financial section, there's a travel policy section, there's a people section, and a supplier section. And all of these elements have overlapping questions for each of them, because obviously they interact in each company, but they're questions that really need to be addressed. They're not meant to be exhaustive, right? There's not 50 questions in each section, but we try to highlight the key sections that are common to all companies. And in your individual company, answering one question may lead to a few other questions that you want to take care of, that you definitely want to address. So on the next page, we have what the work group composition. So what we're saying is the framework is meant to be used as a part of a work group, a return to travel work group, or it can be plugged into if you have an existing work group within the business, which is a business resumption work group. It could certainly be plugged into there as the travel specific module for that. Looking at the work group composition, you'll need somebody who's in charge, a project manager, executive sponsor, travel manager or procurement manager, whoever travel reports to. Human resources, because we're dealing with humans and we want to make sure they're safe and healthy from this. Risk management and legal, we want to make sure we're minimizing or we're covering any sort of exposure to the company for putting people out traveling. Finance, because a lot of this has to do with money, expenses and revenue, and what the long-term, short-term, medium-term, and long-term both revenue and expense targets are. Corporate communications, because we know in travel, communication is key, right? To the travelers, to the budget holders, to the business unit owners, to senior management, and how are we managing how all of these pieces are coming together. That's the core group from internal, from your company. Your company may also, and I would suggest including perhaps a representative from the business unit that has the most travel traditionally, right? To make sure that they're bought in. Because if they build it with you, they'll be more bought in. If you run a lot of events and meetings, if you have hosts, you certainly want to bring someone from that area in as well to participate. And then there'll be some external sources. Your TMC, maybe it's your account manager from your travel agency to come and sit down and be a part of a subject matter expert. Any third-party assistance suppliers like risk management providers, insurance carriers, technology providers, these are more where you're just gathering information from them. They're not necessarily part of the board, but they're sources to gain information. And then any key suppliers. You definitely want to get information and involve them in the conversation in some sort from all of these pieces. And what we actually suggest is that this work group composition here is great for, again, getting back to travel, but we usually recommend having a travel board, a steering committee or so for every travel program, especially if it's large and complex and regional. I'm sorry, that's also part of the work group composition. If you're a multinational, you're going to want regional representation, or you may want to even replicate this work group in a smaller version in the other regions to make sure that, you know, one size doesn't fit all. All the countries, the regions, they're all coming back at different phases and different paces, and you want to make sure you're addressing that. So having local representation or regional representation is super helpful. But what we suggest is keeping this kind of work group going forward afterwards as a check-in, as a steering group. As things change, you're still going to need to talk and bounce ideas and proposals of, here's what we're doing in travel, and here's what we think. It'll help get buy-in, it'll help gather information, it'll speed everything. So to me, it's a best practice to have that type of steering committee in place in the first place from there. The project, yeah, Pete, go.
Got a question for you on that real quick. Is with respect to the work group composition, is there a weighting system or perhaps a hierarchy or pecking order wherein companies should factor input from particular groups or departments as heavier or more critical as we emerge from a pandemic, as we form these groups? How do you define this?
Yeah, so what we suggest, and what you'll see in the spreadsheet that you've done, we suggest using the RACI model, right? So RACI, if you're not familiar, is sort of it's a project management thing, process where for each task, somebody is responsible for that task, right? Their job is responsible to get that done. There are people, that's the R. The A is accountable. There are people who are accountable and actually doing the work that report up to the responsible person or someone from the work group or some other groups that have to get the work done that report up. The C is the consultant, right? So this is where you're having a dialogue, perhaps with the business unit that has the most travel. You're saying, here's what we're thinking. What do you guys think? Give us some feedback. how fast do you need to get back on the road, et cetera. And that's the C. And then the I is the informed. And informed could just be like, this is what we're doing. So for each task, there's a hierarchy, or a prioritization. Who does it belong to? Who needs to be part of the decision, and who needs to just be informed of the decision from that perspective. So it all ultimately will roll up to the executive sponsor. The executive sponsor, if at all possible, should be somebody in the C-suite, right, who is committed to helping you drive this. Because let's face it, even though this project is only scheduled to be about 6 weeks, you're going to need buy-in, right? You're going to have to pull people from all these different areas and have them work together and commit the effort that's required. It's not a tremendous effort, but it's still enough that you have to pull this information and have the meetings and synthesize everything and review the proposals. So you need somebody at that top level, the executive sponsor, at the end of the day, to say, this is what we're doing, team. And if there's any sort of debate at the end of saying we can do this one or this one and we're not quite sure, that's the person that has to make the decision at the end of the day what's going to happen. Did that answer your question? Be close enough?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yep.
So project schedule, relatively tight, right? This is not a 6-month project, right? This is something that you should be able to get in and out relatively quickly. And these are just the high level of what happens in each week. There's the kickoff, then we move to analyses. So in kickoff, it's basically we're making sure everyone's on the same page and we're assigning tasks. Week 2, we're analyzing the results of those tasks, the information that was collected, what was happening, identifying any areas that we still need to collect or need more information, but basically that's what that is. Week 3, we should start work on the first drafts. We should have a pretty good idea on early information about what does our interim travel policy look like. An interim meaning 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and not only what the policy is, but what is the procedure for making changes to the policy? What's the change management and approval structure for all of those pieces? Because you're going to have to change, especially if nothing else, it's going to be when different regions open up, different countries open up, how are we going to address those? So you'll need to do that. So that's the first draft from that week 3. Week 4 should be reviews and approvals. We should be able to move up the chain, get all the stakeholders involved and approving, make any changes that need to happen. Week 5 is distribution, right? We're getting it out to the budget holders, the business unit leaders, and then the travelers and the arrangers from there, and our suppliers, especially when something is going to be involved with suppliers, or we just want to inform them what we're doing. Suppliers are typically an eye on a lot of these pieces. And then week 6 should be a long-term proposal, sort of like, okay, what are we doing to redesign travel, right? So the good news is, in a weird way, everybody's travel went down to practically 0. So do we want to come out of this with the same exact program that we had? Or is this an opportunity to take a look at potentially changing things? And one of the examples which you'll see in the spreadsheet, or sort of led to in the spreadsheet, are internal meetings. So for example, if you don't ask trip purpose for your reservation right now, what is the purpose of this trip? It's primarily to visit a client, to visit a supplier, to do internal meetings for training, for an industry conference or event, candidate travel, guest travel. There are a number of different questions. If you're not asking that yet, that's the type of thing you need to ask. Because we've had one client, a pretty large client, who was amazed once we put this in that they had 61% of their spend was for internal meetings. So 61% of their total travel spend was to go and talk to themselves, right? And there is some value in that, don't get me wrong. But coming out of this, does that need to be 61%, right? With the everyone being more comfortable with Zoom, or Skype or Teams or whatever it happens to be, do we need to? Is that an actual replacement for some internal meetings? And again, it's value creation. Do the internal meetings create enough value for us to do? Should I fly from Boston to Philly for a 2-hour meeting, which really burns an entire day for a 2-hour meeting? or should I zoom in, right? Or maybe once a quarter instead of once a month. Now I'm doing that so that we can go out to dinner and do the personal interaction piece, which is super important as well. But it saves me a few $100s each time from there. So that's what we're looking in terms of long-term proposals, and also how you're going to measure success. I'm sorry to go, and we can leave this here. There's a big piece about how are you going to measure how effective you are. What we like to look at is total T&E as a percentage of revenue, right? So for every dollar in revenue, what percentage of that dollar is the cost of travel, right? So, and some legal firms, consulting firms, that'll be a relatively high percentage. Manufacturing firms will be a relatively low percentage. What we're saying is you should look at that yourself. You should look at least the last 5 quarters of what was your T&E, not just what was booked through the TMC, but your total T&E as a percentage of revenue. Do it over quarters so you can track it. Maybe even do it by business unit if that's available to you. Track performance going forward. See what happens when we're coming out of this, right? Again, it goes back to aligning. If it's 5 cents goes to making $1 worth of revenue on average, can I make that 5 cents 4.5 cents? Can I make it 4 cents? And how? Right, from a total T&E perspective. And then you get into travel being more of a consulting service rather than a cost center, right? You're working, should you take this trip? If yes, how many people should go on this trip? Once you decide how many people, then you need to go into, okay, well, what's the most cost-effective way for them to buy this trip? A lot of elements that go into that, but that's how we would talk about success. So again, that's where the project workbook comes in. We're talking about the framework and the benchmark. It reiterates the project teams and it asks you a bunch of questions or poses a bunch of questions for you and your team to answer. And so on the next page, we have what should come out of this project, right? What should come out of it? So an interim travel policies we talked about, which many of you have, but let's make sure it's as up to date as possible and it's effective, right? And then a travel program redesign. And a travel program redesign being, let's make sure we're really aligning, as we were talking about. It could, and it probably should, involve a new vendor management strategy. Sort of what are we doing about hotels? For example, hotel leakage tends to be a big problem. People like booking hotels directly on websites so they can look at all the pictures, perhaps. Well, if they're booking outside your program, how do you know they're following the safety protocols? That they're staying in a preferred because we've actually vetted that they're doing everything that they're saying to do from a safety perspective. So there's a lot of elements that could help change the way you manage your program. And I think the last slide here would be for me. No, so there are 3 ways you can use this particular framework. You can use it as we talked about, as part of an existing business resumption work group. Just plug it in as the travel module. If you're a travel manager, procurement manager in charge of travel, you can simply just use it as a self-serve, say, okay, this is what I need to do, and create your own process from there. And if you don't have anyone who's skilled at managing that type of project and really doing the full-on program analysis and redesign, you can also engage us. You can go through FCM or 4D, and we can help you manage that process. So I would definitely say take a look at it, read through it, and if any feedback you'd like to give us on any of that, that would be fabulous. We would actually really love that. So I think that's enough for me.
Thank you, Mike. And I actually have just one question for you before we transition to you, Kari. You talked a bit about total T&E as a percentage of revenue. You talked about value generation with respect to what will warrant a business trip in the future versus what might not have in the past. TMCs have a lot of sophisticated ways to track travel spend with things like business intelligence tools looking at data. With the recent surge in video conferencing, how do you think we'll better track the ROI on things like video conferencing versus or with relation to travel? What kind of emergent metrics or data sets do we as just corporate entities need to start looking at?
Yeah, I think I'll go on for hours about data management, as we all know, but I'll try to keep it brief. So This is actually why I go to T&E as a percentage of revenue, right? Because when you're measuring your business, your travel metrics, your average room rate, your advanced purchase, your average ticket price, your cost per mile, whatever, you're only measuring travel that actually happened, right? If someone did not take the trip, they're no longer in those calculations, right? And so what it means to me in the context of the business is you're not showing the full context of the business. So your average ticket price could have gone up 5%, but the number of trips that you took went down 25%. Okay, I'd rather have that, right? So, but if I'm only looking at just within the travel metrics, oh, I went up 5%, I'm doing a bad job. Nope, went down 25%, which actually took us from 5 cents for every dollar worth of travel to 4.5 cents for every dollar worth of travel. For every revenue, travel as a percentage of revenue, let's say, that's where we want to get it more effective. Now, in terms of ROI of video conferencing, I think there will definitely be some shifting, unless if we, you'd have to basically tie that into the booking channel. Say, this is an internal meeting that we've decided is not, and redirect them to the video conferencing, whether it's through the online booking tool or through the agents or something, and track that conversion. That would be one way to do it. But I think just as a general rule, how many trips does it take to generate $10 million worth of revenue in the past? What can we do for now? How many trips can do that now for us? So there's a lot of different metrics, but you want to make sure they're in the context of business and not in the context of travel. Because I think connecting, and travel agencies are in the connection business, right? We're connecting people, we're putting them together, they're visiting. I think we have to realize that connecting for our clients is not just physically sitting in the same room anymore, right? So how are we going to take a look at that whole value to get them connected? Because maybe I'll still take the trip, but now I'll have 5 people on Zoom with me, where in the past it might have just been me on the trip. Now, because we're so used to it, we're going to get an actual better result. I wouldn't say there's an ROI to that because I'm still taking the trip, but there's something there. There's some added value there. That's going to be a little hard to calculate, but really, from an effectiveness standpoint, we're going to look at travel replacement. Overall, the overall performance of the margin generated for business travel.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Very good. Well, with that said, we're going to pivot to Yukari here in just a minute. But if you registered for this webinar and you're listening live, of course, you should have received that workbook that Mike has been referencing, the Travel Project Workbook. If you haven't, we'll of course be sending it out in follow-up after this meeting along with the recording. And don't forget, if you like what Mike had to say and you want to engage with him and the team at Fourth Dimension through FCM, please reach out. We'll have contact details at the end on how to do that. But we are, of course, offering 1-hour complimentary consultation with the crew for anyone who is on this session. So thank you, Mike. And let's pivot over to Yukari. So just quick reintroduction, Yukari Todorich, Global Travel Manager at Discovery. Yukari, I understand that Discovery, like many other companies out there, is of course at historical travel lows due to COVID. With that said, what does your return to travel plan look like at Discovery? And what tools and initiatives are you using or putting into place to help guide Discovery's strategy and inevitable recovery?
Peter, thank you so much. And thank you to FCM for including me in this webinar. I was actually flattered that I got the invitation. So, I think I can answer this question by just going to the next slide, and we can just kind of talk through this. When, I've been involved in our group, in our stakeholder group, in terms of return to office and how does that look? And I thought, gosh, we're talking about return to office. Return to office, as offices reopen, people are going to start thinking about, does this mean I can travel? And so I went on this task to create my own return to travel proposal. On the sideline, no one asked me to do it. I just thought I need to put this down on paper so visually I can figure it out. I can see what input I need to provide and what are the things that I need to work on. I do wish that the FCM return to travel framework was available to me when I started this project, but as soon as it came out, I actually looked at it to make sure that I was pretty much in line with what I presented to my leadership. So you can see the strategies I looked at, honestly, was just looking at what information will my travelers need, when will they need it, what tools will I need to accomplish that. And so my team and I looked immediately at Concur and made some slight changes. So like Mike mentioned about purpose of trip, that was in the pre-COVID, that was at the end of the booking process, and we moved that to the front to really encourage that Zoom meetings. But at any rate, and I agree with him, our percent of internal meetings were before COVID was extremely high. So in the 40 to 60% range, depending on the office and the region. But anyway, I came up with this in terms of criticality of the business trip, essential to the business, importance, and normal. And I really took ICAO's guideline, which is on the next slide, but I took that and I sort of put our business structure into each category. Now, the fourth category, I did take the liberty of changing ICAO's minor for that stage to normal, because I was thinking more of normalizing travel. Minor just felt like it wasn't important, because we still think that non-essential travel is going to be important, right, for that face-to-face communication. But as you can see, I've put in the staggered return to office, and then full return to office, and the timing obviously will change based on what happens with coronavirus. So this is the guideline that I mentioned, the ICAO stages that I used to create that return to travel proposal. The next slide, if you will go there, this is really the travel booking and authorization. As offices started to reopen, you know, people did come to us and say, well, what does this mean for travel? And so as I was getting questions, I thought, oh, this slide right here, we actually took it and made it into a one-pager, so that employees can see right away, is the office open? Because if the office is open, then they can travel without an approval. If it's in-state travel or in-country travel. Now, let me say this, none of our US offices are open right now. Some of the international offices have reopened, but we're restricting that to just in-country travel right now. But no one really is traveling without that approval if they're thinking of traveling outside their country. And those things are like business critical. And you know, a lot of people did ask, well, what does that mean, business critical? So we actually created, in collaboration with security team, we actually created what business critical is, a one-pager with guidelines on here's what business critical to discovery means. And so they have that one-page guideline, and then they have the approval form, and they just sort of go through it and complete it. Some of them will look at the business critical document and decide, you know what, this trip is really not critical, and we'll hold off on that travel. We were actually probably one of the first media companies to stop travel. We actually shut down travel in the first week of March. And we shut down production travel in April. And so business travel shut down in March, production travel shut down in April, and production travel is now back up. It started in June, and we think that business travel will follow, but again, it really will depend on when is the office opening, what is happening with coronavirus. So the situation is fluid, right? We were hoping to have our Knoxville office open in August, but because of increase in coronavirus cases here in Knoxville, they pushed it back to September, and now it's indefinite. You know, we don't know yet. So it's fluid, and we have to be able to just adjust to the situation. And in terms of communication, I'm really lucky that FCM brought to my attention that you are working with SHEP and have invested in SHEP. And so we actually are working on implementation right now with SHEP to help with that communication. I think it's really critical because when you look at the travel cycle, previous to coronavirus, it was all about cost efficiency. Are we in the return, in the ROI? Are we doing this travel as as in a cost-effective manner, right? So preferred vendors was important. The cost of travel was important. All of that was sort of in front of everything else. Then this happens, and now what's important is how do I get the message to the travelers at the time they're making their travel booking? And so when SHEP came around, I thought, this is it. This is the answer for us. And we're very happy that we're about to go live on September 1. We got the green light from our InfoSec team to move forward with the implementation. We are going to do SSO with SHEP to make it easy for our employees. And what I love about that from a duty of care perspective also is when someone goes to Expedia or to a hotel website or an airline website, they'll drive that shopping back into Concur if it's business travel. The other thing is the unused tickets. So we want to make sure that we use as much of the unused tickets as possible before we start paying out for a brand new ticket. So that messaging as well will be funneled through SHEP as well. So when they're in Concur, they'll get a reminder pop-up that says, oh, remember, your company has, unused tickets on Delta or American or whatever. Please book that carrier, or please use that. So we're really, really happy with how that is moving along. We just got off a call with SHEP yesterday on third of our implementation calls, and I'm just so excited, so thrilled. I can't wait to get our hands on our dashboard and start playing with it. It's really interesting, and if the callers today haven't looked at SHEP, they really should consider it. The other piece in terms of what was important for me is the safety and well-being. That was always important, but I think the cost always sort of trumped the safety or the well-being piece. And I'm not saying we didn't care about our travelers. We absolutely did. And we did a lot to think from a traveler-centric point of view in putting our program together. But the safety and well-being, obviously with COVID, is now #1 focus. So being able to provide that instant information will be helpful, because prior to COVID, and even now, they still have the information from ISOS that they receive when they book a trip, but it's after the fact. And whether or not they read it is another thing, right? So I felt that this was really important to get that message out. This approval process right now, as I mentioned, it's only for business critical, but it really provides a step-by-step guide to our travelers. At the same time, we also created a separate one-page flyer for our travelers that talks about the policy, where we relaxed the policy and basically said to the travelers, we care about you. Your safety is of the utmost importance. So we want you to fly with whoever you feel the most comfortable with. We want you to stay at a hotel that's most comfortable for you and where you think that they're really taking care of the proper cleaning procedures and have a good handle on that. So we did relax the policy, and so we clearly communicated that on our one-page flyer. The other thing we did, and I absolutely got excited when FCM created the travel resource page, and there's the Americas, the Asia, wherever they're traveling to, they can click on that destination and look at the information right there. And it's just that instant information, all of the information. When I shared that, I actually did a Zoom meeting with my senior leadership, and when they saw that, they were pretty impressed. And it's very hard to get them to be impressed with anything travel related, but they were very impressed. So I was really happy. So that the link to FCM's travel resource page is also on that flyer. Risk mitigation is there. This approval process is there in bullet points. So we've got this visual, but we also have a one-page document. Our one-page document is also available in Return to Office guidebook that our HR group created. So, I mean, everything was done in collaboration with various stakeholders. So HR played a pivotal role, our security team, our corporate communications, our legal team. So everybody was involved in making sure that information that we have is available in various locations, easy for the travelers to get. We also created a workplace page, and we've always had a workplace page for travel, where we posted this, but we also, at the onset of coronavirus, we also created a workplace page called Discovery and Coronavirus. So our security team and my team are constantly providing updates because, as you know, information changes day to day. So we're really actually quite proud of the collaboration that we've done to work with all of the folks, and it was actually quite easy to do that because I actually reporting to an executive vice president of global real estate, facilities, travel, and security. So you know, it was really easy. They're working, the facilities team are working on return to office. What are they doing? Security and travel have always been tied together because of everything that we have to do to keep our travelers safe. And we have the EVP and our COO's support. So that, I think, covers my piece of it.
Excellent. You absolutely nailed it. Thank you very much for sharing that information with us and with all the listeners. And that leads me to some really great questions about what you've just shared with us. Thing one, let's talk about vendors specifically. You mentioned that Discovery is now allowing travelers to pick vendors that they feel most comfortable with from a safety and hygiene standpoint at the personal level, rather than just pushing things like corporate preferreds, which pre-COVID is what we may have been doing as corporate entities, right? But
Right.
In consideration of things like, let's look at the airlines. Delta recently announced it's blocking all middle seats and is only filling 60% of domestic economy through September 30th. But then on the flip side, other major US carriers like United and American are not necessarily no longer blocking those middle seats, and where possible are potentially filling up to 100% capacity. How, I guess, from your standpoint as the global travel manager, is Discovery approaching its relationships with those different airlines based on like their middle seat criteria, passenger loads, and safety policies?
I will tell you, our two preferred carriers are American and Delta. And so I actually had a conversation with American to let them know that we were disappointed in their decision to operate with full capacity. And they know it. It was loud and clear. American is our primary carrier, and Delta was our secondary. We've actually changed Concur and adjusted Concur to make both of them just preferred carriers. No, there's no more primary preferred, secondary preferred, or most preferred and preferred. So we just made them both preferred. But I did speak with American and said, look, I really want to be a good partner to you, but I do need to think about my travelers first. And therefore, we are not going to be pushing American. And they obviously they understand that. And I did tell them that it will likely continue as long as there are other carriers that are doing something more from a traveler health perspective, like Delta, Southwest, Alaska Airlines. I mean, there are carriers that are still doing that, and we have to think about it. And if American is booked on Concur, we actually reach out to our travelers and say, I see that you booked American. I don't have any problem with this, but I want you to be aware that they announced July 1st that they're doing this. Are you comfortable with this? If you're not, let's go ahead and get you booked on another carrier. So we are communicating, if they book American or United, we are communicating that. We did post that information actually on our workplace page to say, look, to let them know we're relaxing the preferred carrier policy and the reasons why. But if people haven't read it and they book it, we are reaching out.
Excellent, thank you. Let's continue the theme of vendors. Let's talk hotels now. So FCM's recent State of the Market survey that came out in the last few weeks found that due to COVID, 32% of hotels are reducing rates, 55% are holding rates at 2019 volumes, 50% are offering seasonal and dynamic pricing, and many are still offering special deals through the end of this calendar year. On the contrary, GBTA announced in April that it's endorsing the postponement of 2020 hotel RFPs until 2021, next year, due to the coronavirus pandemic's effect on the travel industry. This approach would, I think, see 2021 rates mirror those set for 2020, and no new negotiations would potentially take place until another year and a half from now. So with that said, in consideration of our new reality versus the voice of travel's governing body, how is Discovery approaching its hotel program moving forward?
We are going to do an RFP, but I've had individual conversations with our major property chains to understand their strategy and to communicate what we would like to do and see happen for 2021. And I think we're on the same page, but we are launching an RFP, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we want to ask additional questions. So additional questions around their cleaning practices. While major chains may say they're required to do X, that many of the properties are franchised. So we want to have that comfort level that they are signing off on, yes, they're doing this or that. During our RFP, we want to ask those questions. We're also asking other important questions that have come up from our compliance team, our legal team.
If I can add on to you, Kari, I think it's a really good approach. What we're also suggesting is doing more active traveler surveys, right? So it's one thing that the property says they're going to do, the chain says this, the property says this. We're actually suggesting doing at least spot, if not total. It's not that much travel going on, so you could pretty much do everybody. Did you feel safe when you were traveling on the airline, airport, and airline, at the hotel, whatever it happens to be, and get that feedback from them, because it's the trust but verify, right? The chain says yes, the property says yes. Was it evident to the travel?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have created a very short survey for anyone that traveled. We're sending the short survey out right now. I'm doing it just by phone and Zoom meeting, just like this, face to face, so I can talk to the travelers. And in some cases, if I can't reach them, I'm just sending them a survey link. But it just asks very simple questions. Number one, did you get the information? Did you get the information, the right information from Travel and Security to prepare you for your trip? And the second question is, did you feel safe? And the third question is, how did you feel? Tell us everything about your experience from the airport, Uber, taxi, whatever, hotel. Tell us your entire experience. And we've learned, we're learning a lot from them. For example, New York is requiring people to complete a survey, but so is Florida. Our employee traveled for production to Florida, completed the survey, but no one collected the survey. And it was it wasn't a survey, it was a health questionnaire. No one collected the health questionnaire. Same thing when she returned to New York, she was asked to fill out this questionnaire. No one collected it. So, but then I heard from someone else that someone did collect it. So it's like not consistent yet. So we're learning a lot of things. And what we're telling other people that have to travel is that you may be asked to do this. You may experience this. This is what we are told, but your experience might be completely different. So please give us feedback.
That's exactly the right way to do it. And it will be changing as it goes over time from that perspective. But it's really important to get the voice of the traveler with their actual experience. What do you got, Peter?
Yep, thank you. Thank you both. Just a quick point of clarification. We had some questions that came in that I'll answer actually, just about more detail on SHEP. Yukari, thank you very much for the endorsement, of course, on SHEP. We really like those guys. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with SHEP, SHEP is a web, it's an internet browser extension that allows for pop-up notifications through whitelisting of certain URLs. When you go on a particular page, it then produces a message that you can curate as the corporate entity for your users, for your travelers, if they go onto that site. For example, if you're on Concur, perhaps something like here's our travel policy, here's the latest updates, so here's some of the more recent preferred vendors that we've renegotiated with. Or for example, if you have people that are booking, let's say out of channel, and they want to go to Expedia or direct to supplier on American or United's website, you can perhaps say, do you really want to book this on here? Is this a personal or a business trip? If business trip, please go back to your company's preferred TMC booking experience. And I will emphasize that this is something that FCM announced a minority investment in January this year, and we're continuing to scale out the technology in conjunction with SHEP, but also in conjunction with partners, of course, like Discovery, who are, as we've seen, going to be going live with SHEP full on very soon. So very exciting piece of technology. And if, of course, you have questions about it, don't hesitate to reach out with your FCM representative after this call. So off my soapbox, back to our presenters. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions here. And I'll throw this one up in the air and see who wants to grab it first between Yukari and Mike. Traveler communications. We just talked about SHEP as a communication tool. We also talked about things like modifying policy. Ultimately, an informed and educated traveler base is just as important, largely, as working with a successful travel management partner, as well as delivering a great policy and return to travel framework. So with that said, what are maybe some of the best practices in engaging with the general user base in the travel community within an organization to bring about the safe return and also adherence to things like these new protocols that we're rolling out? Who wants to grab that one?
I'm happy to. In terms of, I think, as we mentioned before, the value is sort of a silver lining of there not being a lot of travel. It's very easy to have a dialogue with travelers right now, right? Because there aren't too many of them. You can get to them all relatively quickly, and you can gather a lot of information. But the key with gathering the information from the 5% of the people who are traveling, of a corporate population, is actually communicating it out to the rest of them, right? So how are they feeling? How are people, travelers like you have had this experience. This is what we're doing to make people more comfortable. This is what we're doing to help our customers feel comfortable with us going out to see them, right? So what we need to do is take the baseline now, get the temperature now, understand what the suppliers are saying, what the travelers are actually saying, what we're actually seeing in the industry, and then putting it out there where the travelers can see it. And that's on the internet, that's on Concur, that is in SAM if you use a mobile application. It's giving agents things to say. Agent scripts if you have a dedicated team. There are a lot of different ways to get the information out, and I would say get them out as many places as possible, because people will hear it at different times and in different ways. But it's really important to build a dialogue, make it a community dialogue, so that everyone can be a part of it.
And I'll add to that too. We have biweekly virtual town hall meetings that's led by our chief HR and our CEO, and both CEO of overall Discovery as well as the CEO for our international business. And what's nice is that they're reiterating some of the things that we've been working on. So communicating with employees during the virtual town hall meeting, and where we have Q&A just like this, and our head of HR, basically sort of is supporting our initiatives. And the message we've been saying through the virtual town hall meetings is, just because the office reopens doesn't mean you have to go back to the office. We want you to feel comfortable going back to the office. Same thing with travel. Just because your manager says you have to travel to do this doesn't mean you have to travel. And so if you're uncomfortable traveling, don't travel. Your job will not be, in jeopardy because you decide you can't travel. So that has come from the top, and it's great that you have, if you have that support from the leadership, it makes our job a little bit easier.
Very good. And we have about 5 minutes left before we wrap. So I have two final questions here actually for you, Kari, and then we'll call it a day here. So thing one here. So in 2019, saw that, changing gears a little bit, Forbes nominated Discovery as one of the best employers for diversity. This has been dominating the news this year in conjunction with COVID. And just wanted to ask your take on this, being that Forbes also just last week published an article saying the need to improve diversity in the travel industry, stating that it's ironic that within the travel industry, which should be intrinsically diverse, that diversity is often lacking. As one of the most diverse employers in the country at Discovery, and as a global travel manager, from your perspective, what steps should the industry be taking to foster a greater culture of inclusion?
I am proud of working at Discovery because of the diversity that we have. Even here in Knoxville, when I was asked to relocate to Knoxville, I thought, oh gee, I'm moving to a place where there's maybe 1% Asian, but surprisingly, I think, I've been surprised living here in Knoxville, Tennessee, that there's diversity wherever I go. But in the industry, I think from an industry perspective, a lot of the focus, I think, on the millennials, the new generation that's coming up, the GBTA Ladders program, I think those are really great. And we actually at Discovery have created a project called the Mosaic Project, and it's all about including and being inclusive to a lot of different groups, and our internship and all that. I think if the industry focuses more on the skills and the technical work that is needed, rather than the color of the skin or the age or the sex or whatever, I think we'll get a little bit more, I think we'll get there. I am proud, with my team, I always called my team the mini United Nations, because I have a diverse group and I only have 7 people on my team. So I really do think that we'll get there. I see from the TMCs that I've worked with, FCM, and the travel suppliers, that that diversity is their focus now, and I really root for them.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the wise words. The last question we're all asking ourselves now is, with the production travel that you mentioned shutting down this spring, is Shark Week going to happen this year?
Yes, Shark Week, August 9th. Thank you. I was going to do a plug with that. We actually, in fact, just flew Mark Rober down to Bahamas. That was a nightmare, by the way, because they kept on changing their rules. But yeah, Shark Week, definitely.
Very good. Thank you so much. So on that, if we can go ahead and skip ahead some slides, here is the FCM Resources Hub that we had mentioned earlier in today's presentation. Check it out online. For our current clients, it's also available on SAM as well as the FCM Hub site, hub.fcm.travel if you are a client. And with that said, thank you very much to our speakers, Mike and Yukari, for lending your expertise on today's highly informative and valuable session. Of course, be sure to follow FCM on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also view our COVID-19 resources page. I think that was the URL just passed there, so go ahead and check that out as well. And if you registered, we'll be sending out the workbook for those who haven't received it already, along with this recording. Don't forget to redeem your 1-hour complimentary consultation with 4D, Mike & Co. to kickstart your return to travel planning, and reach out to Suzanne Heller or Carly Theroff via email to help facilitate this. That said, watch out for Shark Creek. Thank you for joining us. Safe travels. Take care. Bye-bye.
Peace.